Hello, everyone. Excellent to be here talking with you about opportunities in THC, cannabis beverage, hemp beverages specifically, although there'll be takeaways here for cannabis brands as well. But a huge thank you to Craft Beer Professionals, to Andrew for having me, and my colleague, Bryan Roth, who will be joining us momentarily. We are both from Sightlines. Sightlines is a insights platform for the beverage alcohol and functional. Oh, hello, Bryan. As I live and breathe. Sightlines is a consumer insights platform for the beverage alcohol, cannabis, hemp, broader THC, functional CPG spaces. Bryan and I, you may know from being in the beer world. We know many of you from that world. Really, we are taking our decades of experience reporting on beverage alcohol and bringing that to an insights and analysis platform for this industry, as well as hemp and cannabis. Bryan, would you like to introduce yourself and add anything to that?
I think, one of the things that Kate and I excel at, which has been really great for Sightlines, is the fact that, obviously we have a long background in covering the beer industry, but over the course of the last, 5 years or so specifically, the way that we've paid attention to other areas of alcohol and increasingly cannabis and all of the kind of adjacent functional spaces all factors into the ways that not only are we covering this space, specifically cannabis and hemp-derived THC, but also helps to inform the way that we're understanding how consumers are thinking about it too. If you do want to follow up with us, we have our emails on the screen right here. We'll have it at the end as well. Shoot us an email if you'd like to chat about anything we share, as well as get access to a sample report that we created specifically about the hemp-derived THC market as well.
Yeah, a lot of the information we'll be sharing with you today came out of our reporting for this massive multi-part series on hemp beverages. So there is so much more than what we're going to be able to get to today. So if that report is of interest to you, there is a sample version we can send you. So please do get in touch. All right. So yeah, I think we covered a bit about this, but yeah, Bryan and I spend a lot of time speaking with all tiers of the beverage alcohol and regulated and mainstream hemp businesses, regulated cannabis and mainstream hemp beverage businesses, talking to all tiers as well as consumers. We are not a sales data company by any means. However, we hoover up data like vacuums and really turn that into actionable insights for companies. So you're all bombarded with a lot of numbers, a lot of information, and our job is really to articulate why that matters and some strategic actions you can actually take using those data and insights. Bryan, jump on in.
Yeah, and this is the way that you can see some of what we do. You can listen to it. We have a podcast called The Gist by Sightlines, available wherever you may listen to podcasts. You can find it over at sightlines.news as well. The goal being that a couple times a month, Kate and I will go through 3 of the top news stories from across alcohol, cannabis, functional wellness. We give you lots of context just so you can be more informed about those topics and talk about them with greater clarity as well. And then one of our bread and butters is also our newsletter that goes out twice a week. You can see an example of some of what we shared with our THC multi-part series. We cover all these areas and more. The whole idea, again, like Kay had said, to be able to provide a more holistic, broader context of what's going on and why, just to help our subscribers be more informed and do their jobs better.
All right. This is what we're talking about today. Let's get to it. Yeah. Bryan, take us away.
Yeah. So, this space is obviously a very exciting one, not just for companies that are brand new entering into hemp-derived THC, but especially as we've seen increasingly over the course of the last 6 to 12 months, craft breweries who see this as a real way to connect with new consumers, deepen opportunities for sales with current consumers and more. So, the 2 big things I think that Kate and I are going to emphasize, we have a wide collection of data that will help to give context for what's going on. But we really, really want to emphasize how we take a consumer first perspective, because that's what's going to help you take away some of the lessons here to either, think about how you might approach this category or deepen your connections with your portfolio that you have or you're trying to build too. So that leads us to talk about, I think we've got 4 main areas. What's at stake? So kind of the top level priorities of what's going on and why geography matters in particular, especially as we think about hemp-derived THC versus areas where things like recreational cannabis are widely available. We're going to be taking that consumer point of view, and then we're also going to think about, what we can consider in the future and even near term as we think about cost and the ways that consumers have that as part of their mindset as well.
Yeah. So these were broadly the 4 pillars that shaped that multi-part report that we put together. So again, if one of these is of particular interest to you, again, feel free to reach out and ask about that. Let's start with what's at stake, though.
Let's do it. This is a great example of, in this moment, we're looking a few years down the line here of what's happening with the hemp-derived drinks space specifically. So, the way that there is so much attention from producers, distributors, and retailers on this, that $750 million mark certainly has potential to grow more. But the drinks category specifically has the highest potential growth rate of any category within the hemp-derived cannabinoids. Number 2, that's flower pre-rolls, is smaller both in terms of dollar sales as well as that compound annual growth rate. It is a larger total dollar amount by far, but it doesn't matter who you ask or where you look. The fastest growth percentage and opportunities is within hemp-derived drinks. So, the market itself is growing. It is fast, and people are clearly showing interest. So this just kind of gives you the baseline of what's at stake here and what could be coming in terms of the amount of money being spent.
You all are here because you're very interested in this space, and consistently we see that questions about hemp-derived beverages are swirling around brewers conferences, trade group meetings. This is just a space with tons of interest and tons of energy right now, tons of dollars.
And a lot of that is simply, because of the rapid availability of drinks too. But, the reason that this category, the subsegment, has become so interesting to us and to consumers is that it has that feeling of familiarity that people have come used to just in the form of drinks. So, the share of cannabinoids across, D8, D9, THCA, whatever it may be, cannabinoid drinks have basically tripled in size in just the last year. So this is obviously a very, very big growing category. And Kate, and some of the work that you did, maybe just to give a touch more context to the format, this idea of the literal drinkability is pivotal for consumers.
Yes, I think the format almost completely explains why there's such rapid uptick in these beverages versus something like pre-rolls or flour or vapes. Beverages are something people just understand from the non-alcoholic or from the alcohol space. There's something about hemp-derived THC drinks that just maps really well with an analog in the alcohol sphere, right? They're a social beverage. You don't have to step away to smoke. You don't have to leave the group activity. The lower dose ones can be sipped at something like the same social rate as a beer, right? So maybe you can sip a 3 milligram hemp drink at kind of the same pace you would drink a standard strength beer. And they present the same kind of flavors and textures that people expect from sodas or seltzers or beers. And so there's just this familiarity in a category that can seem intimidating to people. Like THC can for people who are not super familiar. Beverages make that really, really easy. And then even for seasoned THC consumers, they tend to taste really good. They have fun flavors, fun packaging. There's something about the power of beverage that's really core to why hemp products as a category are growing so fast.
And perhaps most importantly, too, it is appealing to people of all ages. So when we were working on compiling collection of data specific to hemp-derived THC, Kate, if you want to hit the next slide, the way that we saw this shaping up is that obviously we have, people in kind of their young to middle age who have a large collection of the total volume right now. But in terms of where the growth is coming from, it is all over. So for the fastest growth rates, it's 60s, 70s, and then you see 20s below that. This is a difference between 21 and 2024. And so, the ways that other categories may have, historical baggage, or the way that people just presume them to exist in their lives, or how they choose to consume mood altering products. Right now, the way that hemp-derived drinks specifically are finding a hold, this is across a variety of ages. So we can't just make an assumption this is 20 and 30 years old. You have almost certainly heard stories and read things about, Gen Z's not drinking anymore because they're Cali sober. That's a whole other presentation, but we are seeing lots of growth across age ranges as it relates to hemp-derived product use.
I spoke to a woman who's a hemp beverage enthusiast in New Jersey. She's in her late 40s, and she said she brings these drinks to her neighbors who are in their 60s and 70s, and they're a little, maybe they're a little skeptical at first, but she says, drink it, you'll feel like you just had a beer. And that's what gets these older generations. They're like, well, I've had beer, Again, that analogy between beverages and that they've had before and enjoyed, and the hemp-derived space, I think, is really critical to some of those potentially older consumers who are a little more wary of these products.
And one of the things that we get asked a lot and has come up in conversations with companies who are making these products, or especially if you're already making something else, is, does it need to be tied to my overarching brand? And increasingly that answer is no. We have seen in recent years the way that craft breweries, whether they're entering spaces within cider, FNBs, RTDs, having something of a breakaway brand can be advantageous, especially in this space where for cannabis and hemp-derived THC, we are talking about different use case situations. People perceive the cannabis in a different kind of need state than they would alcohol. A cannabis user may find a drink to be more appealing on, a night alone at home, or a case where they need to relax, whereas alcohol is more often associated with sociability. So these are a few examples. Foothills, I'm in North Carolina. They're Little Trees brand, Burial Beer, Resident Culture, also North Carolina-based brands. You can see that they are differentiating their beer brands from their THC drink brands. And Wild State Cider, which is in Minnesota, they have Birdie THC drinks. They were actually in the process of removing Wild State as part of their aesthetics for the cans too, just because they found that, one, people are attaching to Birdie individually, but as they are growing their product, obviously Wild State Cider, which has brand affinity in Minnesota, will have far less so if they're selling in Florida. So as you are thinking about what this space can mean for you, just know that consumers are not directly attaching ideas from one parent company to what the THC drinks may represent, especially just because they do take up different moments in time and need states for people.
Mm-hmm. And your most dedicated customers will find this from you, right? If you're selling this out of your tap room or what have you, they will find these products if they already know you. But why not reach some potentially new folks with a new brand?
Yeah. So just to kind of hit on the few main talking points here that we want to emphasize for takeaways, that the interest is real. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars being added over the next 4 to 5 years. And because of the newness of the category and the way that people are flocking to it, especially people finding new use cases, there's a less reliance on branding closely tied to the parent company or craft brewery. THC drinks are offering something for different occasions and different people. So embrace what that means as you're thinking about what these brands could be for you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Geography. This is
this is
so
a really
critical.
good. Yes. So as we're underlying a whole bunch of things within this conversation, this is a really, really big one that Kate and I have talked a lot about. And here's a really simple way to think about it, is that, where you have legal recreational cannabis, you in theory should have less invested interest in hemp-derived THC just because people can walk into stores and find it. Now, there's a lot of nuance that could be had later on in terms of, hemp-derived THC existing in some states as a lower dose option, things like that. But when we're talking specifically right now, a place like the South, where there is a severe lack of legalized cannabis, either medical or recreational, this is almost 2/3 of hemp THC beverage sales in the United States versus a place like the Northeast, where you have many states who have recreational cannabis legalized. That holds 16% share of hemp-derived THC beverages as well. So where you look to sell and how you sell it really, really matters.
And this is something where our consumer-focused mindset really matters, because the industry tends to tell itself that cannabis and hemp, very different, different channels, different regulations. To the end user, when I talk to consumers, even ones who are avid fans of hemp drinks, THC is THC to them.
Yeah.
The vast majority struggle to articulate the difference between them. They say, "Oh, I know there's a difference, but I don't know. They both get me high. They both kind of come from the same plant, right?" So to the consumer, there's THC in it. It gets me high. The nuance of cannabis versus hemp is very lost on even the majority of consumers that I'm talking to who are avid consumers of this. So again, that kind of explains why, well, if I can walk into a dispensary and get cannabis, that's how I'm going to do that. If I can't do that, then I get it through hemp. And in the consumer mind, those are, the same end experience generally.
Yeah, and these next few slides help to emphasize what we're talking about. So this list 1 through 10, these are the top 10 states for Google searches looking for hemp-derived cannabinoids. And the common denominator across these, that recreational cannabis is not legal. And Kate, if you want to just jump to the next slide, we have a map to help emphasize this too. So what you're seeing here is an overlay of a few different points of information. So the big circles that you see in these states are its density for number of legal cannabis dispensaries. The red marked states where you see the outlines there are those states where there is high volume of Google searches for hemp-derived THC products. The contrast, obviously, is that those searches for hemp-derived products are existing in states that do not have legalized cannabis options for people too. So, the people in my home state, like North Carolina, where we cannot get legal medical or recreational cannabis, is through the roof because people are trying to find an alternative to fit within, that product set. They're trying to find THC options, and then they're going to Google because they know they can start finding them more readily available here in retail at a Total Wine in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm. Versus where I am in Montana, where medical and recreational cannabis is legal, and we have a pretty high number of dispensaries per capita, actually. And you will notice we are not a state searching very frantically for hemp-derived cannabinoids.
So here's a way to think about it too. So what you see on this chart is kind of an approximation of states where the potential to pass legislation politically to legalize cannabis is going to be, if not non-existent, very, very hard to do. We saw this with the big fight with Amendment 3 in Florida this past election cycle. The attempt to legalize cannabis in that state did not pass. So the states marked in red on this map represent what we saw from the kind of a supplement to the last map, that states where cannabis legalization is going to face these problems, they're facing this wall of political challenges, are going to be the states where there's probably the highest opportunity for hemp-derived THC. So if you can't get cannabis legally because of it's just not going to get passed out of state legislatures, what people will be looking for, and they're already searching for it, is hemp-derived THC. So as we're thinking about future markets, whether you're starting products in your home base where you are right now, thinking about DTC, direct-to-consumer options, or expansion, this is a good map to start from when you're thinking about what's happening with legalized cannabis right now and what that means for people who are searching for hemp-derived THC as a federally allowed version of that product of THC.
Yeah.
And so a lot of what Kate and I talk about is the same idea that, we take that consumer mindset of why, but when it comes to these THC drinks, the where is going to be just as important as that why, especially as you're considering, what's going to be available right now and the way that you might work to maximize your audience in the future. That's because some of beer's biggest states too, they have legal recreation cannabis in dispensaries. And then that is opening the door for hemp-derived brands to flourish in mainstream retail locations in some of these other states. And we'll touch on this soon too, that we've seen a lot and heard a lot from middle tier, from distributors who are showing lots of interest in trying to bring brands on board just because this is something that's clearly flying off shelves and consumers are showing interest in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think to this middle point, we should be clear that, if you live in one of those states where recreational cannabis is legal, this is not to say there is not an opportunity for hemp-derived THC. The two can interact in interesting ways, which we will get into. But if you are in one of those states that does have a number of recreational dispensaries, it's just a more nuanced play, and you're going to have to talk to different retail channels and different occasions. So we will get into that. This consumer point of view comes out, in addition to all the data work that Bryan and I do, we spend a ton of time just talking to average people who consume this stuff. And I think it's been so critical for us because there are certain narratives that the industry tells itself about these beverages and who consumes them and how they consume them. We touched on earlier, the distinction between cannabis and hemp being this really serious kind of gulf. Consumers, again, don't see it that way. So, speaking with Tia, who was a consumer I chatted with in Austin, very developed market for hemp beverages. She's a big fan. She could tell me all these different brands she likes. She goes down and gets them at the gas station convenience store near her house. But as she was telling me, I think it's all probably fine for me and all kind of the same. It all works the same. And I don't know what those deltas mean, but if they're selling it, I'm going to buy it. So I think there's more of these consumers than the industry might assume. People are just looking for that end result and are doing minimal research on exactly those distinctions it'll take to kind of get them there.
Okay, let's take a moment maybe to pause and talk about some of the questions and just kind of high level topics that, we certainly hear about. And this is, again, taking this topic of hemp-derived THC from a consumer perspective. The top level one, obviously, is it legal? Mostly because people recognize, again, THC is THC. So when they see it on shelves, I think, Kate, there used to be, if we're talking maybe a couple of years ago, the fear of taboo-ness that carries with it, that you're doing something that's wrong. But we are increasingly seeing, in markets across the country, especially over the last 6 to 9 months, that the normalness, this is a common thing now to see it in major retail, grocery, convenience, liquor
Total
stores,
Wine.
Total Wine and Spec in Texas. So this idea of, is it legal, is still maybe a broader high level question to some, but it's being chipped away at pretty regularly.
This has shifted dramatically in the couple of years that we've been talking to consumers about this. I think, in addition to seeing it in stores that they trust and are used to going to, I think, the mainstream media coverage of these beverages and seeing recommendations for this stuff and everything from like a Men's Fitness to, the New York Times, I think helps consumers accept this as just another beverage in the wide range of mood altering substances they can choose from.
Yeah. And perhaps important too, when we're talking about hemp-derived THC, we are talking about a new, but at least typically different customer than longtime cannabis users who are used to visiting dispensaries for all of their needs. Some states have a cap for beverages, such as 10 milligrams. There are a lot of entrants that go into this space with somewhere between, we'll say, 2 milligrams to 10 milligrams, just because this does represent a onboarding opportunity. So this is a very different consumer, Kate, when we're thinking about someone who's maybe been using cannabis for years, used to going to dispensary, is looking for, 100 milligram THC edible versus someone who's looking for that typical, approximate buzz they could get from a beer, which is going to be maybe 2 or 3, maybe 5 milligrams of THC.
Yeah, those are very different consumers, at the very least, very different occasions, right? That high dose, experienced cannabis user who is used to shopping in the dispensaries, is looking for sort of that bang for their buck. Like, I want to feel it, and I might be using it honestly in a kind of a solo setting. I might be using it to help me go to sleep or to help me just relax on my own. It's not an occasion necessarily where they are, looking to drink this at a backyard barbecue with friends. I would argue that's more of that hemp low dose beverage occasion and consumer who is a little bit newer to this. Probably their biggest fear is bang for the buck. Like, they want to ease into this a little bit. They're still feeling this category out. And so, that 2.535 milligram is a way safer and more approachable starting point for them.
Yeah, there is a reality right now too, where with so many products on the shelf with prices that are effectively comparable, we have heard and we have seen consumers take the perspective that, if they're spending $8 on a can for a hemp-derived THC drink, one is 5 milligrams, one is 10 milligrams. There is some one-to-one work that they're doing in their mind as they would for any other kind of alcohol, for example, where there is a bang for buck reality that they're considering. Part of this is also that people are just learning this category for the first time as well. So whereas somebody may start out maybe trying that 10 milligram and realizing it's too high, a lot of time and effort is being spent by companies like Cann, like Breeze. I'm sure that these have come up in conversation that you've heard of. They are focused on the low dose option just because that's where it sits a very nice space, especially for newcomers into this category too, who are feeling it and what might be applicable for how they want to use these products in their lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've spent a lot of time talking to wholesalers as well about their interest in carrying these beverages. This varies widely by company. Some companies will not touch hemp-derived THC with a 10-foot pole. They are legally wary of it, or they're just proceeding with a lot more caution. Others, such as this wholesaler we spoke to in the southeastern portion of the U.S., are diving in head first and see the opportunity to put more cans on their trucks to the same accounts that they drop off beer in, speaking to the same channels, the same consumers, honestly, as well. So again, this is really sort of a how risk averse is your wholesaler. And I think also what we're seeing and hearing from this tier is that distinction of your brand, which we are going to get to shortly, is becoming really important as wholesalers who are enthusiastic are onboarding a lot of these brands. At some point, if the consumer is saying THC is THC, these wholesalers are going to start asking, I have 10 brands knocking on my door that are all hemp-derived seltzers. Why should I carry yours? So we're going to get into a little bit of the brand positioning question, but wholesalers are kind of a mixed bag on this question still.
Yeah. As you are thinking about the way that a THC brand might fit into your portfolio, and especially in relation to a distribution partner, I think a couple of the common things that we continue to hear as we're doing research in this space is the brand positioning, but also that sales assistance too. There is a bit of, there's a little bit of an educational aspect to this that this can be important. But the sales help is mostly just built around the sales help and not necessarily having to act as a teacher for people. They're a Total Wine, they do sampling every week, especially for these THC drink products. But the goal being that as you're partnering or considering how you partner with your distributor for these products, there's obviously a lot of excitement there, but just be mindful of the way that your relationship has evolved with them for beer too, that, this is a fast growing space. We see things moving quickly on shelves. So having that kind of conversation, knowing what they need, as well as what you can provide is going to be really, really important. I'll underline, Kate, that last sentence that we see on this slide: embrace the idea it's meant to be fun and indulgent. This is just so core to what is succeeding with a lot of, I'm not going to say alcohol, but like mood altering brands across the board. And I think this shows up often the way that we hear from consumers that, this kind of nascent category of hemp-derived THC just really fits that space of fun and indulgent for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's, I think that over the last few years, as there's been a rush to educate. Yes, people want to know what these products are, but they want to know that information in the context of how it makes them feel. That's like the number one question. What's it going to taste like? How does it make me feel? If you have some nerd customer who wants to talk to you about emulsion technology and like bioreactivity and available cannabinoids and minor cannabinoids, sure, go wild. That is not going to be your average hemp or cannabis beverage consumer. Again, for most people, this is fun, relaxing, kick back, unwind, turn my brain off. So I think, you want to equip consumers with enough information that they feel confident and safe taking drinks of this product. But I would really save the technical stuff for that one guy at the party who's going to ask.
I think, a good way to think about this is the challenge that takes place when you're trying to describe the intricacies of beer styles to an average drinker, whereas their primary concern and the question they most commonly ask is, what does it taste like? So, trying to get into the nitty gritty, if you're making these products, you probably have your lab reports available on your website. That can be available for some people, but for the onboarding consumer, this is more about describing what that flavor proposition is going to be and how it's going to make them feel. So just please keep that top of mind as you're thinking about the ways that you're communicating and marketing these products to.
All right. How much does it cost?
Perhaps more important than ever, start of the year, people are thinking about budgets. Obviously, there have been lots of price and inflationary worries over the course of the last couple of years. Hemp-derived THC drinks carry kind of a fun space, though, because they are new and people are fine paying a premium for them right now, but there is change happening right now and there will be more in the future. So we're going to start this section highlighting part of a comment that Bart Watson made over at the Brew Association website. He was looking at cannabis specifically. There's an ongoing worry about how people use cannabis products across alcohol. If someone's using one, are they not using the other? Kate and I have done a significant deep dive on this for Sightlines. The answer is no. If you want to learn more, sightlines.news, and you can contact us to learn more. But the idea being is that as people are able to spend more budget on alcohol or cannabis or hemp-derived THC drinks, so they're going to be more curious and they're trying to find where they can spend that extra money in their pocket. Now, this is particularly important as it relates to hemp-derived THC drinks because what we see in states where legal cannabis is available, prices naturally come down over the course of time. So our expectation would be, even as people are willing to pay a premium right now for hemp-derived THC, we're not far off from a space where as more products come online and a wider range of price points becomes available, there is an expectation for a lower cost to the consumers than what they're getting right now.
Yeah, it's sort of supply and demand, but it's happening on both sides, right? Consumer demand when cannabis is first legalized, or when hemp-derived drinks first become available, people are really willing to spend because it's so new and they're so excited and they've never been able to legally buy it. So hooray, I'm willing to spend, a real premium on that. And also there are fewer brands early to market, so they have less to choose from. They might just consumers just have to pay more. Then over time, the novelty factor decreases for consumers, so they're less willing to spend. And also, now there's 4 times as many competitors as there were before, bringing that cost to consumer down. So we are already seeing this in hemp very clearly. We are seeing a lot of downward pressure on costs. Retailers really want this cost to come down. Consumers consistently tell us they want this cost to come down because they are looking at what a 4-pack of THC drinks cost, and they're looking at what a 4-pack of alcohol cost, and they're doing the math, and it is not coming out in THC drinks favor. So consumers consistently tell us they want to see parity with alcohol because in their minds kind of maybe does similar things or kind of works the same way. So again, lots of downward pricing pressure right now.
Yeah, the average price, broadly speaking, you'll find cans of, a 12 ounce, or even you find some in an 8 ounce can of hemp-derived THC ranges maybe between like $4.50 at the lowest cost, which often comes in higher volume packages, up to $9 for brands that maybe have a very specific premiumization message too. So as larger companies enter the space, so Tilray, Curaleaf are coming in with rather aggressive prices per can on average, maybe around $5 or so. So this is important to keep in mind as we think about what happens with price pressures moving in the future. This is a great example from Colorado that we used on Sightlines, that, over the course of a few years, you see that price coming down pretty quickly. There's actually just a report as we're talking today. State of Michigan released their latest findings for their annual cannabis sales report. And the average price of a gram per flower, I think, dropped by $25 over the course of 23 to 24. So this happens very fast. And we want to use this as a close one-to-one with what we expect to happen from the hemp-derived THC space, just because for cannabis, it doesn't matter what state you look at, that price is going to be coming down over time. And so the expectation, especially on the shelf, like Kate said, where you can see maybe I'll buy a 4-pack of THC drinks for $20 to $25, but if you turn around and you see a 4-pack of 8% double IPA, that's going to be $16 or $17. All of a sudden, that contrast is going to be creating a little bit more friction for consumers too.
This is that consumer perspective. Exactly. I mean, especially as we see, pack sizes get kind of analogous between hemp-derived THC and alcohol. Again, and they're both on the shelf at Total Wine, just invites the consumer to do that math. Bryan and I spoke to a hemp beverage brand this morning that in the dispensary channel, so actually they make cannabis beverages as well. In the dispensary channel, they have a 100 milligram multi-serving cannabis beverage that when they debuted it years ago was something around $10 per 100 milligrams, which was wildly undercutting the market at the time. Comparable 100 milligram cannabis beverages were selling for about $22 then. Now the average price, this brand was saying, is sub $10. So that's how quickly this pricing comes down. And when consumers just think THC is THC, again, it's really hard, I think, to unless you have great brand positioning and a premiumization hook, it's going to be really hard to stand out as these prices continue to come down.
Yeah, and just to emphasize, this doesn't necessarily mean that for pricing or quality or brand that this is just a race to the bottom to try to get the price as low as possible, because that's what's going to capture the most customers. It's just that right now, when we look at a store shelf and there are dozens of different options at high price points, that consumer mindset is going to start shifting over time, especially when they can more clearly delineate price potency and all these things of one versus another too. So there's just a natural downward pressure, and that's why Kate and I like to use states with recreational cannabis as a great example, to have that as something that we can look at. It's just a natural decrease in price as, there's lots of options. People are going to become more aware and sensitive to what that means. This does not mean a lack of quality necessarily so much. It's just a natural downward pressure, and people can take price right now. Because of the newness of the category and where this baseline is being set. We just expect that to change over time. So the way that people are price sensitive in food and beverage, this is new and worth the splurge. However, this doesn't mean that people won't expect lower costs in the future, especially once we get to a place where they can more clearly do line pricing in their minds with, one product from a THC beverage option versus other alcoholic ones too.
If you have yet to launch a hemp beverage brand, but you're considering it, prepare for this lower price future. Know that this is coming. And then think about what, if you do have to come in at a slightly higher price point, think about what the premium brand positioning hook is that would explain to consumers why it's worth, the extra couple bucks, as you would with any product, right?
Yeah. And so, as we are thinking about ways that we want to continue to highlight what's going on in this category and the way that consumers are thinking about it, these are just some of the topics that we're focusing on at Sightlines with both, our content from the newsletter, as well as topics that we discuss on the Gist by Sightlines. The idea being that as this becomes maybe a fifth category in a way, we've got the fourth category of various RTDs and things, and that the commonality of finding hemp-derived THC on shelves, creating this additional space. These are questions, what kind of flavors people can find. Obviously, the effects are going to be really important. How might they be able to find those flavors and effects that customize experiences for a consumer in ways that they prefer? These are all things that kind of are in the periphery, and something, will matter a little bit different to some well-versed, longstanding customers, like understanding strains in the beverages. But most important, I think the things, Kate, that we highlight the most, right, are going to be flavor, the need state and use case, and the way that you can position your brand positioning to matter, not just now, but be that longer term brand that's going to stick around in the future that people can feel attached to.
Yeah, and these are all questions that I think those of you watching are used to answering, hopefully for your beer brands or for your other beverage brands, right? Like, what does it taste like? How is it going to make me feel? When should I drink this? Who enjoys drinking this? What kinds of activities and occasions can I attach this to? These are all, it's the same. It's just another beverage brand. Some regulatory differences here, but at the end of the day, when it comes to the consumer point of view, consumers are asking the same questions about these beverages as they are about beer, wine, cider, FMBs, RTDs, etc.
All right. So here are our emails again. If you'd like to follow up with us to have questions, we've saved a couple minutes for questions here at the end of our presentation as well. But if you want to reach out, have questions about things that we shared, we also have a sample report available for the work that Kate and I did, focused on the hemp-derived THC drink space. You can email us, brian.roth@sightlines.news, kate.burnott@sightlines.news. And we'll stick around for a couple minutes to handle any questions. We have one maybe just to address, Kate, thinking about cost again, about willingness to spend on lower dose brands. So if we're thinking about that, as low as 2 maybe, but as high as 10. So this is an outlet situation. This is something that we touched on too. There's a clear difference between people who shop at dispensaries versus people who are going to a Total Wine, a Specs, a ABC to buy too. So there is, again, in that newness, the baseline is being set at, it's $8 for a can. There's just a natural willingness because that's what it is.
Yeah, I think some of this is, all of it is just consumer expectation and what they see on the shelf. And if if the high end is, is $10 for a 10 milligram can with some really interesting flavors and some really premium branding. But then, the low end of that is $7, and there's plenty in between that. But it's setting the parameters, right? And because it's a relatively new category right now, consumers don't know what they should be spending. They don't understand how cheap the soluble cannabinoids are. Like, they don't, that is not, to them, this is a premium new category. And I mean, think about what people, I guess, were spending on, buying illegal cannabis. Who knows what people were used to spending in various markets for that. So again, just the ability and ease and convenience, and that's what it costs. Like, that's what I will spend until all of a sudden the $5 can shows up, and then suddenly it's a game changer. And I think that's the phase that we're in right now.
Yeah, Kate, there's another part of this too, where, we mentioned it as we were talking, the potential challenge, the worry of the supplement versus complement alcohol consumption. So Kate and I have done significant research around cannabis specifically. And as we've talked with people in the hemp-derived THC space, whether we're talking about people who make it, buy it, drink it, sell it, is that there continues to be, what we find with regular old cannabis in recreational legalized states, that there are different situations that people are picking and choosing for these things too. There's just a host of sales data, anecdote that we get from people, academic research that show that these are used in different cases for people. And so there's just not significant evidence right now that shows if someone's buying a hemp-derived THC drink, they are not going to be consuming, the same 1 or 2 beers that they might drink a week too. And Kate, in fact, you did reporting that focused on how craft breweries use this to both find new consumers and connect deeper with current ones too.
Right. I think that's a huge question we've received is this for my existing customers or is this for new customers? And the answer is yes, both. When I speak to particularly smaller breweries that are primarily selling these out of their tap rooms and in local distribution, may not have dedicated sales reps for these or anything like that. What I hear is that yes, they are seeing customers who come to their tap room specifically to buy a 6-pack of hemp beverages to go, and they never see them for beers. However, there are also, selling incrementally to people who came in for 2 beers, didn't realize the brewery also made hemp-derived beverages, and now take a 6-pack home with them. So it is both new customer acquisition and incremental sales, which I think is sort of that 1-2 punch that makes these drinks so appealing, because the answer is selling more to the people that already know about you, and customer acquisition, which is extremely expensive in general, and hard to do with the existing range of products you already make. This is a really nice strategy for that.
Yeah, so if you have questions, feel free to reach out. You can also find more information about what we do and what we research over at sightlines.news. We look forward to hearing from you. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Bryan. Thanks, you all, for being here. Thanks, Andrew, for having us.